Mm. All right, we're live. What's up, everybody? My name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. Today, I'm with Elizabeth Bykoff. Did I say your last name correct?
You did.
Not bad. Okay, good. So, Elizabeth, where are you calling in from?
Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. Yeah, one of my favorite cities ever. Live music. Oh my God, you guys got a lot of stuff going
Comedy,
on.
you know,
Comedy, right? Right.
barbecue. You want to keep going? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, okay, I got to dive into the deep end here. 155. Seriously?
Yeah, that's correct. It's been a while, but yeah,
So you've jumped
155
out of a
jumps.
plane
Mhm.
155 times.
Yes, willingly, to be clear.
Wi-
Willingly.
what was the first jump like? I gotta ask you. Like I've
Um,
never done it, and
yeah,
maybe never
yeah,
will, but we'll see.
yeah.
Never
The
say
first
never.
jump, yeah, it's interesting because people usually do a first jump like a tandem, what's called a tandem, right? So you jump and you're strapped with somebody behind you. And I didn't. I was with friends and we went directly into training and thinking we wanted to get certified. And so my first jump was what's called a static line jump. So you are like in the military, you have a chute on and the chute is attached to the plane, right? Static line. And then you jump at about 1,000 feet high, not that very high, and you have to keep the position. And yeah, and the tension in the line opens the parachute for you. So that was my first jump ever on my own, which then I'll pass you the details. But I basically ended up going through the motions, freaking out when it was time for me to jump without a static line. So I ended up completely converting my training to what's called accelerated free fall. And from there, I just didn't stop. I just went from one certification to the next, and yeah, 155 jumps. It's in the world of skydiving. It's not that much. I've met people with 10,000s of jumps and counting. It's their passion. So I'm just kind of a baby, and I've stopped doing that for a while. So yeah.
Super cool, super cool. So why don't you kick us off? Tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
Boxy.io, what you're building. We'll keep it short for now, but we'll come back to that topic near the end of the interview again.
Yeah, well, we're trying to really build the AI chief operating officer or chief of staff for startup founders, early stage, right? I think we've all met first time founders or even second time founders or multi exited founders that all the crap we don't want to do as founders, I call it, like is how far we can go to really help founders with that. And as you know, we had to start somewhere. So our wedge right now is fundraising operations. So anything to manage your raise, pre-cap table management. But it's pretty fun, working with a lot of partners and yeah, trying to help founders just keep building.
I gotta say off the top, I absolutely love that vision. I think you are bang on in terms of like the direction you're looking, and at least my gut says that, yeah, chief of staff, that is exactly where the puck is moving. So excited to double click on that, get your perspective on. I think you also told me in an earlier conversation you've interviewed like hundreds of founders, and you've kind of arrived at where you guys are with the business. So it's super, super interesting. I always find talking about money and business and tech falls flat unless people know about the person, right? And so far we know that you like jumping out of planes, but you grew up in Nice, right, on a steady diet of American movies. What was the like the version of America playing in your head as a kid?
Yeah, I think the version of America was that everything was possible, still land of opportunity, at least from a work and career perspective. Obviously a bit of like romanticized idea of relationships and friendships. I mean, I am a Sex in the City generation. I don't know if you remember that show, right? Obviously, who doesn't? So the four gals in New York, that was like the ultimate goal. Can I make it in New York or something like that? That was the original vision. And then I was actually a really big movie buff, so I thought I was going to be a film director and eventually make it to Hollywood and just produce, not even produce direct movies. I was never wanted to be an actress or anything like that. So, it was just like the trifecta. Can I be in the movie industry? Can I make it to New York? Can I have all these relationships? And it felt like, everything was possible through those movies. Obviously a lot of stereotypes too, right? When I first landed, some shattered shattered idea. But yeah, that was really how what I felt. And when I first visited in 1994 at 12 years old, I promised myself I would come back. So, and I would start my career here. So
So
yeah.
you wanted to be a movie director, then a
Mhm.
lawyer, then you
Oh
ended
yeah,
up in aerospace engineering.
I did.
How did you land on engineering?
So my dad sat me down at 17 and say, "Daughter, love you very much, but maybe you should go get a degree that feeds you in case it doesn't work out, right? If the film industry doesn't work out for you." And I was really good in STEM, so I thought, you know what, maybe I should go into law or science, right? Engineering. My dad's an engineer too, and I was going to do this dual program law school. There was a French law and then English or American law, and I always wanted to, like I said, come back to the U.S. Flanked the English test because I thought, oh, I speak English at home. I don't have to prep for the test. Flanked it. So last thing left was going to prep school, which is the way you get to engineering school in France, right? You go 3 years to prep school. So I ended up doing that, and then I got into it, I just kept going, and I had to pick schools. We go through very long 4-week, exams to get into engineering school after that prep school, that 2 year, 3 year, and I didn't want to do computer science. How ironic. So no electrical, no anything. And I loved traveling. I loved planes. And I thought I should go into aerospace. And I ended up in aerospace. That's slowly how I ended up there. So yeah.
Super interesting. Um, so am I pronouncing it right? Tallahassee?
What do you
Is
mean?
it called, is that the name of the city? Is the
Oh,
Airbus
Toulouse.
city?
Toulouse. Toulouse.
Toulouse. Okay, okay,
Mhm.
okay. So what was it about flight or about, big complex machines that pulled you in?
For me, it was always, a bit of that magic, to be honest, right? I mean, if you think about flight in general, it's all aerodynamics, but for most people, it's like magic, right? Do you really understand the difference between pressure on top of the wings and the different airflows? And so for me, I really wanted to, and I picked, there's only four at the time. There was only four engineering schools in France that were doing aerospace. Now there's only three. The one I went to was not only teaching about the product itself, right, and how to build an airplane, but it was also teaching us a lot about the business of it, right? So airlines, airports, you name it, everything around it. And that's really what attracted me, is that it was not just about the product and what I specialized in, which was flight dynamics and controls, but also the ability to understand the rest of how you make money actually out of this big engine, right? So that's really what drove me there.
You met the general counsel of Boeing Commercial twice over coffee, and he told you not to come work there or something like that, right? So what did he actually say, and how did you take it?
Yeah, when I moved to the US as a visiting grad student, and then got my MBA after, graduating from aerospace engineering, I still wanted to get into Boeing, right? And so the first time around, they're like, "We won't hire engineers, go home." And remember, it was 2004, so 3 years after 9/11, not sponsoring visa. So then I got into the MBA program, and I had the chance to meet him. And after a couple of coffees, it was like, "Do not come here." And I was like, "What?" Dream shattered, right? Like, why this head of legal counsel telling me not to come to work for Boeing? And he really told me, like, "Listen, I've met you now a couple of times. I think I have a good sense of who you are." And Boeing is a big, at the time, big ant farm, very male oriented, white. Most people on the business side come from the engineering side. At the time, they didn't hire a lot of people from the outside to come and do the business. And he was really transparent and say, "Why don't you just go do something else? And if you still love the industry, come back to it. But I don't see you coming in and just doing this, right? Like just directly being into the end farm kind of thing." And so it was very disappointing, right? Because I was like, "No, this is my dream. Now that I have, aerospace engineering and an MBA, I just want to stay in this industry and, really, really work on this big machine," right? And I ended up in consulting, believe it or not, right? I fell in love with strategy, and I just went the other route. And I thought, hey, maybe I'll make my way to airlines, supporting clients as airlines or even Boeing, and never did. Never did. So
And then you spent 10 years at PwC, right? And built
mhm.
their Salesforce practice from 0 to 200 million globally. What did consulting at that level, teach you that founders today don't get exposed to?
Really two or three things. One, it's thinking on your feet. As I was, PwC at a time when I joined was rebuilding the consulting practice because they had sold them to IBM a few years before. So I had an opportunity to really get thrown into clients really early on, sometimes on my own. And, I wouldn't say you have to learn how to BS, but, you get questions and you don't know. And so you really have to think on your feet and sometimes admit like, hey, I don't have the answer for you. Let me go figure it out. And so I think that's something, as you know, as a founder, right? Like there's a lot of, I wouldn't say BSing going on, but you have to be thinking and pivoting and, what do I do here and how do we make this happen, right? So a bit of that's been really something that's helped even throughout my career, right? Not just founder, but even, in the pre-IPO world before I decided to be a founder. I think the other thing too is learning, as you're a consultant and you're going to different companies, you have to ramp up on the industry, maybe if it's a different industry or the company before you get in front of the client, right? So you're actually knowledgeable of what they're trying to achieve, their business or anything like that. And, that same thing has been absolutely instrumental in my post-consulting career or even as a founder, which is like, can you pick up a topic and just try to be as knowledgeable as possible to try to get, at least start cranking, right? And so that learning curve and that fast learning, that's something that you learn very quickly through consulting, and then you can use that post outside of consulting. I think the third piece is people. I know it sounds maybe counterintuitive in some ways, but we only sell people, right? Our only assets in consulting, and it's changing now with AI. But at the time was people, right? You're coaching, you're recruiting, you're mentoring, and I had a really, really good coach for many years at PwC that taught me that. And so I took that. And I think that's also very important, as a founder, who you surround yourself with, who you work with. And again, I have that counter of, I kind of want to try to prove that, you can be a nice, or at least a nice founder to succeed. You don't have to be quote unquote a jackass because I've worked with a lot of those, throughout my career. And so, that's the kind of thing that the three things I've taken from my consultant time.
Yeah, I know, working with Charles, I know exactly what you mean. No, I'm kidding. So I was going to ask you, Boxy. So you were, no, I love him. You were on the partnership track at PwC and you walked. What was that conversation with yourself, the night before you handed in the resignation?
It was, what the heck was I doing? I started thinking this was going to be it, to be fair. I thought this was going to be my linear career. That's really what I wanted. I wanted to be in the leadership team. I wanted to do that. And, in a way, it's very French of me, right? I mean, I come from a culture it's changed now, but at the time, you would get in a job and in a company and you'd be there for 25 years. You know what I mean? And not as entrepreneurship as the US at all. And again, it has changed now in the last 10 to 15 years. But when I grew up, this was like, you're at, a bank or anything like that, and you stay with them for forever until you retire. So I really thought when I first started that was going to be it. I was just going to go through it. And so, when I made that decision, because I was burned out, there was things going on. I felt like, the goalpost was moving, and I think I was also ready to go do something else. It was a bit of a grieving process. Like it's like a loss, right? Like I had to pull the trigger, made sure that I could financially continue, because I didn't have a job. I quit with no job, to be clear. So, you think about like, hey, I can sustain myself until I find another job. And then, it was like a death, I'm literally, it was a loss. Like I know I was going to go through this loss, and I think it took me 2 years to get out of my system, like the thinking PwC, right? Because it was so ingrained in me. I think it took at least 2 years to grieve, the fact that this is what I thought I wanted at the time, that I was not going to, get it, or at least not here, not now, right? So, yeah.
You've also said that the expectations on women felt heavier than on men. Where did you feel that most concretely?
Yeah, I mean, as a partner or a director at PwC, it's like you have to sell, you have to deliver, you have to hit your numbers, you have to coach people, hire people, and also help build practice, what we call practice development, right? So all the internal projects or anything you want to call, right? And there's a lot of things like that. And, transparently at the time, which is almost 10 years ago, as I was going up, there were way more expectations on my number, or that I had seen other male counterpart not barely selling anything and making it, right? Or treating people like crap and making it. And so, even though I checked all the boxes, it was always like, there is noise in the system, Elizabeth. You're too direct, right? My French side would come out too much. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, and at the same time, you'd be on calls and my male counterparts would be treating people like crap. And you're just like, wait a second, I've never treated anybody like that way. But somehow I would get the feedback, there's noise in the system. And so again, I think, no regrets, Sunny. Like it was a great experience. I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't do that 10 years at PwC, if I didn't have the opportunities. But at some point it was just like, hey, if this is not gonna happen, maybe I should do something. And I don't think it will not have happened. I think it would have taken me longer than what I wanted. I felt like I had paid my dues and I was traveling every week, West Coast, East Coast for the job and selling and delivering and doing all that stuff. And so I was like, you know what, maybe that's not here, not now. So let's go do something else.
Got it. So going from PwC services to product side at Apttus, like what broke in your mental model in the first, 60 to 90 days?
Oh, the first one was like, services doesn't count. Nobody, valuation has, forget about services, right? Like 1x, 10x, Elizabeth, doesn't matter. Even though you need that to onboard clients, like we don't care. That was the big thing, right? So you're coming from a company that's all you do is services, right? There is no product no, only the product counts, right? And so I think that transition to Apttus was a great one because, it was still 250 million when I joined. So it was not like Series A or below, right? So at least I had this great way for me for the first, to your point, 60 to 90 days to learn really quickly that ARR is all that counts, right? Like your services are just a byproduct. And that was the big break from coming from a services company. So I had to learn that really quickly. And then picking up a lot of the things related to running a business, right? I mean, even though you're building things at PwC, you're not seeing, there's other people running the backbone of the business, right? The day-to-day. And so here you're part of that team, right? You're part of that leadership team, you're, from HR responsibility to anything, right? And so that was very, very interesting the first, 90 days to start being involved in that and really seeing that side of the business.
And then you went from Apttus that was generating, I think you said 250 or whatever and million in revenue, and then you went to a 1 million ARR Series A company next. So what surprised you about that gap?
Yeah, I took that leap. I thought if I don't do it now, I'll chicken out and never do it, and stay only at pre-IPO or late stage companies. So I thought, hey, it's time to do it. So then you're getting thrown into the deep end of like no structure, right? No infrastructure whatsoever. Because at 250 to 90 mil, like there's some structure that's been put in place. It might not be perfect, but you have something. There was nothing, right? I mean, nothing. You know what I mean? Like it's like Series A, you got to check and now let's go, right? It's time to scale. So it was interesting to get, now you're like, okay, well now that's really, I'm back to building. I'm back to when I was building the practice, when we didn't have a practice and there is nothing, right? Like nothing at all. But again, all with that focus of product, not services. And I was mainly in charge of the post-sales team, right? So it was interesting to do that and having to be like so scrappy, right? So scrappy and just making sure the numbers made sense. But that was, actually, I enjoyed it. Do you know what I mean? It was like, oh crap. And then you're like, oh, cool. Okay, well, maybe we should try things and, see if it breaks and see how we do better and try this. And then you get pulled into other areas of the business because you're like, oh, Salesforce, you've done that for 10 years. Can you help us set it up? Things like that. So that multi-hat was really great and I enjoyed it. So, and I think that's why I just kept, another Series A and then pre-product, pre-revenue, right? So, yeah.
So Boxy started as an ops in a box during COVID. What was the first version, and what did you think you were building at the time?
Yeah, the idea actually came after COVID at the end of 22 when ChatGPT came out. Transparently, I thought if I have one more founder asking me to build a B2B sales process, like how do I build a B2B sales process at Salesforce HubSpot? I was like, I'm shooting myself in the head, like literally like same questions over and over again, right? It was just, you're working with all these founders and you're like, there has to be a better way to provide that knowledge and that best practice to founders at scale. So when ChatGPT came out, I think the tech's finally here. So that's when the ups in the box idea really came out. Obviously, I didn't jump right in like, hey, I'm quitting everything. Let's go. Let's do this. I really started 2023 with let's go talk to as many founders, as many early stage operators. And then I started Morgan Stanley Inclusive Ventures Lab at the end of 23. So I was in the middle of my ICP, which was great. And then, the evolution of AI going so fast and, agentic workflows and then MCP and all that. So the vision kind of really also pivoted a bit from just, hey, guiding to, hey, we can now help them set up, orchestrate, and potentially scale them, right? Help them scale through that. So it's been, it's definitely been a journey, but that's really how it started. I thought, hey, can we take all this great knowledge that's out there and just condense it some way so founders don't have to call the network, like, do you know what I mean? And just figure it out on their own.
And then you spent, I guess, 2023 validating this idea, right? So what did you hear in those conversations that made you change direction or kind of move in this direction?
Yeah, really quickly in 23, what I've heard was a couple of things. One, I think one of my friends slash, actually investor was like, you're trying to build like startup for dummies. Remember those books, like the Yellow Book? I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure I've got
Yeah,
at
I
least
think that's
five
T1
or
right
10.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
T1
I
right
mean,
there.
yeah, those are my
Yeah,
favorite.
yeah. So he was like, hey, you're trying to build this like startup for dummies, but like, dynamic, right? Not just a book, but like dynamic, which was really funny. And then, when we were like, hey, where should we really start focusing? There's really three themes that came out, right? Fundraising, like nobody likes to do it. Revenue operations, so the full customer life cycle, like not just dimension, but like, hey, how do I manage my customer, make sure they don't churn, all that stuff. And then hiring talent, the piece of just identifying talent, hiring them and onboarding them. So very simple, right? These were the three themes that came out early stage that everybody just, again, not a lot of other things, but those three things were just like, this is what takes most of my time. And I don't always know how to do it best, and we're not great at it. And so that's what I took in, into 24 and into, with the design partners, and at the time doing a hi-fi clickable prototype, pre-lovable, pre-everything. So that's what really we heard, and so that's what we ended up, eventually getting to, and that's why I started with fundraising ops right now, right? Like we just took that into all the, the MVPs and things that we built.
And then you've also said that the real unlock was realizing investors want transparency too, right? Not just founders. So can you walk me through the moment that landed?
Yeah, the moment that landed was that I always had the vision that we would have a control center. Like, one of the big things that was always interesting coaching founders was around metrics, like knowing your metrics and where they at and making sure you're not running out of cash. So from day one, we always thought I would have a control center with the key metrics out there. And so when we shared that with investor last year, as I was starting to potentially fundraise and we were showing them, just what we had, they really liked the metrics part of things, right? Like hey, oh, wow, could you give us that view of, the startup's metrics into our deal flow or into our portfolio companies, right? For our portfolio companies and being able to kind of collaborate on the platform for that. And transparently, I was like, well, wait a second. Yeah, we always thought there would be a sharing mechanism. But then what happened was that the more I was talking to some of the investors, we discovered that, they were just like, same thing, fragmented tools from a relationship OS perspective, Affinity CRM and standard metrics or Airtable, you name it. And they didn't have a really good view of, the founders, like, and following that founder or that company, right, over time. And I thought, I was like, wait, you have all those tools. I don't understand. Like, why am I, hearing this as I'm talking to you about just sharing, key metrics? And so we ended up talking, I don't know, to 20 plus, 30 plus investors in the spring of last year, and ended up thinking, hey, you know what, we should do a quick MVP to see if we could do that, which we did. We ended up doing a quick MVP, put 3 pilots, we put 3 pilots on the board, and then just starting to get feedback on that, that relationship OS for investors, and that, two-sided, it's not a marketplace, but two-sided platform where all interactions between founders and investors would be on the platform, which went really well. As you know, it's a chicken and the egg, and it's where do you focus first, right? So, but yeah, that was very interesting. I didn't expect that at all from investors.
And Boxy positions as a safe AI COO, right? That replaces the first ops hire. What does safe mean in your stack, and why is that like the lead word?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the, I wouldn't say fear, but as founders, we all want to make sure our IP is protected and our data is not shared. We are pulling data in some cases if you already have your QuickBooks set up or anything like that. So some financial data. So one of the big thing was to make sure that from a security perspective, this would not be, we would take precaution from day one on that. And so, yeah, a lot of things is, safeguarded, not share across, obviously startups or anything like that, and having all the safeties in place, and certifications to make sure that, people were comfortable with that. So that's what we've been working on from day one, from encryption, you name it. And then also from an AI model perspective, right? I think a lot of people are worried that, their data is being, used for training purposes. We are very specific on what is being used to train the model or enhance the model. And, we just make sure that that's out there and that we share that with founders that, that this is not for us to take your IP or share your data or anything like that. So, yeah.
So you've lost, I think, is it 2 CTOs since July 2024? What did that teach you about, being a non-technical founder building AI infra?
Well, it's funny because when I first started building, there was no, like I said, it's pre-lovable, pre-verse V0, pre-everything, right? So, the idea was that you needed to have that kind of technical leadership, at least to get an MVP out, right? Like you need the technical leadership eventually, like, if you want to scale, so that there is no, no doubt about that. I think, I think in this time of age, I think with what the tools that are out there, I think you don't need that as much at the beginning, just to try to at least prove that you have something, right? Obviously. And so I think, that's changed the amount of build, let's say, that non-technical founder can do. It also means that there's a lot of us just building stuff and not sure if we're going to make it either, but I think, again, I think what I've learned is that it's not indispensable at the beginning now. Do you know what I mean? But eventually you're going to need it, and you have to find that tipping point of like, yeah, now I really need that technical expertise in house. I need that partner in crime that's really going to help me take that to the next level. And so, but I've also, again, I was doing multi-million-dollar implementation at PwC, right? So product development, even though, Salesforce is a platform, so I don't have to start from scratch. I do understand the, the software development lifecycle, agile or not. And so I was able to, manage the engineering team. It's not my favorite thing to do, don't get me wrong, right? I'd rather spend time on BD and all those other things, but you got to do it. It's still my vision. And, I've had some stumbles and trying to get into the rhythm. But, I was not completely like, I have no clue what to do. Right. I knew, but I wish I had that partner in crime. And I still need that partner in crime. I know that's coming. So that's where I'm at right now.
Lovable will spit out a prototype in an afternoon, right? But Boxy is months of like real engineering. So how do you talk to founders and investors about that gap right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, it's funny because you're mentioning that as a gap, but also the fact that, back in 2023, 24, as I was talking to those founders, and I had to spin a pitch deck at the time, really quickly, because somebody introduced me to an investor, and she's like, send the pitch deck. And I was like, oh, I don't have a pitch deck. I don't have a product. I don't have any. Okay, fine. Let me do something. Right. And as I was getting feedback on it, one founder was like, you need to put Copilot everywhere. Like, because it was that time right after ChatGPT came out, like Copilot, right? And I was like, I'm not doing that. That's not what I'm building. I knew from day one, I didn't want to build a wrapper around an LLM. I was like, no, this needs to be a platform. The only way it works is that if we have the context, the data pipelines in, and then we can just continuously improve the model and just really be relevant for those founders. We can't just be generic and it's just this wrapper. It's not going to work. So I always had that vision from day one, but that means it takes longer to build. AI kind of evolved over time. We had to evolve and rebuild some stuff over time too. And that I have to admit, Sunny, this is like still something that I feel I have a hard time communicating even with investors, right? It's like, it's not a deterministic cursor, wrapper or anything like that. It's like, hey, we're really trying to build that context over time, that memory, and that just takes time. We have to do integrations. Obviously now it's a bit faster than it used to be, but it's way more work. It's just a reality, right? It's just not, to your point, just a lovable and like, hey, look, guys, this is awesome. Like, yeah, I mean, it's going to work for a little bit, but then what? Like, you have to build that infrastructure in the background, right? And again, I'm not CTO, so I'm learning that infrastructure too as I'm working with the team. And so I think that's the piece is just now you add the security layer, now you add the integration, now you add the AI agents, and you want to make sure they're safe and your data is not there. There's all those stuff that you have to think about that when you're doing a lovable or a V0 or anything like that. It's not always. They're building more and more in it, but it's not there, right? So,
and your thesis is that distribution and GTM are the real moats in AI, right? Not the model. What does that mean for how you're building your company?
Yeah, I think even from a SaaS perspective or AI, a lot of the tech we don't own, we're all using other people's tech, right? Even more than it used to, where you were just slowly coding your line. Your code was that was it. That was your real IP, right? Now, Cursor's coding for you, Cloud Code is coding for you, and you're using everybody else's tech. So, at the end of the day, it's going to be go to market and getting market share, right, on some of the products, right? Because there's so many people being able to build almost the same as you are, right? I mean, it's just, or maybe slightly different perspective, vision for the product, but we're all, I'm starting with fundraising. I have already, that, Sunny, right? A bunch of people trying to do the same, right? It's not, so who wins? I don't know. I think the market's big enough that it's never going to be one player in fundraising, at least, to get started with. But the distribution is super important. So for me, like, I always knew I was going to go through partnerships at least and do a lot of that. So startup communities and VCs and you name it, any ecosystem partners, fractional providers, or even fundraising coaches or anything like that. So that's where I'm focusing while I'm still doing some direct and all that. I think, what I've noticed too, and it's not just with founders, but I think we're all overwhelmed with the amount of tools and AI that's out there, and whether you buy versus build. Can I get it done myself for cheaper than paying the $20 or $40 a month, right? So one of the approaches to here is just, Boxy enabled services too. I've put out a couple of packages, nothing to make, it's not where I'm going to make the money, but I think there's also people just looking not just for the AI, but the guidance behind it, right? And the AI is the leftover, right? After you're gone, it continues, right? And so, A/B testing all those channels and trying to see what hits. But so far that's been, helpful for us at least.
So help me land the plane. We got about a minute left here. 5 years out, what does the operating system for a startup look like? What is the founder actually doing in their day-to-day?
Yeah. 5 years from now, you buy your domain, you get your email, and you get Boxy to get you started to build your company from day one. So you have the right foundation, and founders can pretty much initiate anything, whether it's buying and setting up your minimum viable tech stack for your business to get cranking, whether it's, tracking I don't want to be a to-do, platform. That's never when task management. Yes, of course, that's one of the pieces, but the idea is that you really have a sidekick. Like I don't want to say co-founder because that's not fair. That's not what I'm trying to build. But if you don't know where to start, you don't know where to go, we're kind of laying that out, and it's slowly just helping you execute on that you have a solid, solid foundation to scale. So when you go for your first check, you can show investors like, this is it, like you're ready to go. That's really 5 years from now. And it's also not just SaaS businesses or, tech startups. Like we've opened it up to way more entrepreneurs to really make sure that they're successful and, they build a successful business.
I love the vision, Elizabeth. I think what you're building is amazing, obviously aligned in many ways. And yeah,
Yeah.
I wish you the best of luck, and hopefully we can, figure out ways to help each other. And
Yeah.
thank you all. I see we have a bunch of people tuned in. Thank you all for tuning in, and let's do this again, I guess, whenever you're free, Elizabeth. Would love to have you
Sounds
back on
good.
the show. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Elizabeth, hang out for 1 second. Let me bring this stream to an end.